Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. Here's a look at what's coming up in today's show. Donald Trump hands down his first measures to clean up what he calls corruption in D.C. Our Doug Herbert will also be on hand to take a look back at the president-elect's week. There's still no clear winner from the presidential election in Haiti last weekend, but two of the country's biggest parties have already claimed victory for their candidates. And while Mexico may love its football, or soccer, as Americans call it, this week, real American football moved back in. First up for you now, the number of the week, 6, for the 6 measures Donald Trump wants to put in place in his first 100 days in office to clean up what he called the corruption and special interest collusion in Washington. Those include bans on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave government service, and a requirement stating that for every new federal regulation, 2 existing regulations must be eliminated. So Donald Trump's giving Americans a hint of his policy priorities, but his broader agenda and what he might actually do in the White House remains as uncertain as ever. Our commentator and resident U.S. politics guru, Douglas Herbert, is with me now to talk a bit more about that. Doug, also this week, Donald Trump gave a wide-ranging interview with New York Times journalists in which he seemed to flip-flop, to roll back on certain of his campaign promises. Is Donald Trump softening already, or is he just saying what people want to hear, as his critics often say?
Look, if you're going to take him literally at his word, yes, he's softening technically on paper because, look, he said during this interview, for instance, climate change, he's going to keep an open mind about it. That's 180 degrees from what he was saying in the campaign when climate change was a hoax perpetrated by invented by the Chinese in order to make American industry less competitive. Locking Hillary Clinton up, that was the big chant of his supporters during the campaign. All of a sudden, he very kind to Hillary Clinton in this New York Times interview, saying he has absolutely no intention at this point in any way, shape, or form of pursuing her, of continuing on with these investigations. And his spokesman already said before that basically a chance to heal, give Hillary Clinton a chance to heal. He even flopped on the New York Times itself. He called it the lying, the failing New York Times during the election. Now, all of a sudden, it's a great, great paper, a jewel of American journalism that he reads regularly. So look, on so many fronts, he is softening. But the problem is this. The real question is, how much should you read into this so-called softening? Because we've been talking, we always say Donald Trump's not an ideologue. And that may be almost true to an exaggerated degree in the sense that I'm not sure that Donald Trump himself completely knows what he thinks when he wakes up in the morning, what he's going to think at the end of the day. He seems to be the ultimate pragmatist, and his point of view at any given moment often seems to be a function of who is sitting opposite him. So if during the campaign he didn't rule out waterboarding, thought that it could be good if it works, why not do it, right? It's torture under international law. In this New York Times interview, he seemed to suggest absolutely not. I was sitting down with one of my advisors, potential defense secretaries, and he told me, no way. So he said, you know what, probably not. So he seems to flip on a dime, absolutely.
And yet he also seems to be sticking to some very controversial staff picks, particularly Steve Bannon as chief strategist. Now, just to remind people, Steve Bannon has been widely seen as a racist, as an anti-Semite.
A racist anti-Semite, and as the former editor for nearly a decade of the Breitbart News, which many describe as really a tribune of white supremacy, at least espousing, embracing those views and everything, to have that guy whispering in your ears. So you're absolutely right. Given what I just said, he said in this New York Times interview that and the word he used was, he disavows and he condemns these people. Yet you have to ask yourself, he obviously said something during his campaign that made these extremely hardline anti-immigrant, anti-minority, whether we're talking blacks or Muslims or Latinos, rally behind him. He could sit there now and say till the cows come home that he disavows and condemns them. But a lot of people are right now saying that he has almost, it's incumbent on him, a responsibility to do more than just disavow. They see disavow as being extremely weak. Some are calling for a full-fledged speech to get up there and denounce with as much stridency and make it known that he wants nothing to do with these white supremacists, with these neo-Nazis, with these ultra-nationalists, and be as strident in his blasting and denunciation of these people as he is, say, in his blasting of the cast of the Hamilton Broadway musical.
Doug, just very briefly to wrap up, Trump also interestingly said he is no fan of the Electoral College, and yet he has lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton now by some 2 million votes.
This is the crowning irony. You know, it's not the first time that Donald Trump has actually said that he's no great fan of the Electoral College, and he did reiterate that when he was at the New York Times. And he went further. He says he'd rather do the popular vote. He says, I think we do at least as well, if not better, with the popular vote. Right. Now, you look at me that way, and you're absolutely right, because you know that factually, right now, Hillary Clinton is not just ahead in the popular vote, but it has been going up steadily. It's over 2 million votes. I think it's about 2.2 million that she's ahead as of now, as me speaking here right now, in the popular vote. So it's the crowning irony that Donald Trump at the New York Times should say that he's never been a fan of the Electoral College, when it's only thanks to the Electoral College that he is now president-elect of the United States.
Indeed. Doug Herbert, thank you so much for that. Well, also in the U.S., this week saw a series of 4 shootings of police officers across the country in just one day. A Texas detective was shot and killed while writing a traffic ticket outside of police headquarters late Sunday morning in Texas. Later that same day, 2 other officers were wounded in incidents in Florida and Missouri. This is the worst violence against police in one day since July, when 5 officers were killed in Dallas by a heavily armed sniper. Less than 2 weeks later, 3 others were killed and 3 wounded in an ambush in Louisiana. Next now to Haiti, where there is still no clear winner from the presidential election there last weekend. But 2 of the country's biggest parties have already claimed victory for their candidates in the long-delayed vote. Ballot counting began immediately after the election, but the official results are still not due out for days. Emerald Maxwell reports.
Defying the Provisional Electoral Council, former President Michel Martelly's PHTK party declared a win on Monday, days before official results are expected.
The people have already made their choice, and everybody knows that the name of the president elected today is Jovenel Moïse.
In Haiti, the top candidate needs to take more than 50% of the vote, or lead by 25 percentage points to avoid a runoff. According to the PHTK, this is what their candidate Jovenel Moïse has managed to do. Down the road, however, supporters of the opposition Famille Lavala's party poured into the streets to claim electoral fraud and declare victory for their candidate. Outside the presidential palace, guards fired warning shots.
On February the 7th, Marius Narcisse should be at the National Palace.
The unrest comes after the weekend elections were largely hailed as peaceful. Vote counting continues, with tally sheets still being transported from remote parts of the country late on Monday. Nearly 6.2 million people were eligible to vote, but turnout was low, at under 22% according to observers. Haiti is attempting to restore its shaky democracy after nearly a year of political limbo under a caretaker government. The vote was first held in October 2015, but then annulled over complaints of fraud. Whoever wins will have the enormous task of rebuilding a country which is still feeling the effects of the devastating 2010 earthquake and was left reeling by October's Hurricane Matthew, which has left 1.4 million in need of humanitarian aid.
Let's take a quick look now at some other stories making headlines in the Americas this week. Foreign ministers from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Mexico have vowed to, quote, defend the 6 million migrants from those countries who live in the United States. Their comments came after promises from Donald Trump to crack down on immigration and deport millions of undocumented migrants. A new peace deal between the government and FARC rebels is back on the table in Colombia. It comes after the last agreement was surprisingly shot down in a referendum. The new revised agreement will be submitted to Congress for approval rather than put to a popular vote. But opposition groups say it still does not go far enough in punishing rebels for human rights abuses. And Bolivian President Evo Morales has declared a national emergency over a lack of water. Morales said Monday that national and local governments are authorized to use state resources to attack the problem caused by a severe and prolonged drought. Much of the high-altitude capital already receives water for just 3 hours every 3 days because reservoirs serving the city are nearly dry. Well, Well, Mexico may love its football, or soccer, as Americans call it, but this week, a real American football moved back in. The NFL returned to Mexico Monday for a regular season matchup. Our Andrew Hillier has more now on the rise of the Liga de Fútbol Americano Profesional.
In Mexico, soccer is king. But these graphic designers, lawyers, salesmen, and students are gunning for spots on a different kind of football team.
The dream is to play professionally, but I never imagined it could be as real as it is now.
Mexico has the largest American football fan base outside of the US, with an estimated 25 million enthusiasts. Mexican college games are now televised, and after a 10-year absence, on Monday night the NFL returned to Mexico with a regular season game. A sold-out match between the Oakland Raiders and the Houston Texans. The odds of Mexicans being drafted into the NFL are slim, but they can now aspire to be paid to play in Mexico's up-and-coming professional football league.
Fortunately, the professional league has given many of us who are studying or working the opportunity to test ourselves in professional football. But my goal in life is still to become a doctor.
Last year, players were paid about $75 per match, a tiny sum compared to wages in the US.
The sport is a paid profession in the US, and they see it as such. We're still amateurs when it comes to professional American football.
Mexico's love of American football might not be ready to tackle the country's devotion to soccer, but it's finally beginning to catch up.
Well, American football is also a major highlight of the annual Thanksgiving holiday celebrated this week. And so, of course, is turkey. Americans eat their way through some 46 million turkeys at Thanksgiving every year. But last year, there were also some 1,400 cooking fires on Thanksgiving Day, more than 3 times the usual number. To make sure everyone stays safe and sound, this time around, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission came up with this video. Now, it shows what can happen if you place a frozen turkey into a deep fat fryer. Well, that is a definite do not do this at home. We'll leave you with that. Happy Thanksgiving weekend wherever you are. We'll see you again in the next Inside the Americas for all the news from north to south.